After 40 years of married life, my wife told me, I've been laughing at your failures with my friends for decades. Minutes passed, her best friend texted me by mistake, and I uncovered everything. I 67M have been married to my wife Bernice 66F for 40 years. We were college sweethearts, raised 2 kids, and lived what I thought was a loving, respectful marriage. That was until our 40th anniversary dinner, when she looked me in the eyes and said she had been laughing at my failures with her friends for decades. I thought I misheard her. Minutes later, her best friend Carla accidentally sent me a text that was clearly meant for my wife, mocking me and my reaction. That one mistake unraveled everything I thought I knew. I went digging. What I found broke me in a way I didn't think possible at this age. This is the story of how I lost my wife, found the truth, and began a new chapter of my life alone, but finally free. I never thought I'd be one of those people posting in a subreddit for relationship advice or stories. I've always been the quiet type. Not particularly emotional, not especially dramatic. Just steady. The kind of man who fixes leaky sinks, shows up to every parent-teacher meeting, never forgets an oil change, and calls his grown kids every Sunday out of habit. I married Bernice when we were both in our mid-20s. I met her at Syracuse University. She was magnetic. People gathered around her without her even trying. I was the guy in the corner of the room with a soda in his hand, watching her command attention. She liked that I was different from her. She once told me I grounded her. I took that as a compliment for most of our life together. We bought a home just outside the city, in a quiet neighborhood with old maple trees lining the streets and sidewalks that cracked in the winter frost. We raised Clara and Miles there. Every milestone, from scraped knees to weddings, happened in that house. It was filled with family photos, fridge magnets from trips we took, a drawer full of tangled charger cords, and a living room where Bernice always insisted on changing the curtains with the seasons. I worked hard. Mechanical engineering isn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave us a good life. Bernice worked at a local gallery, part-time. She said she liked the freedom. It let her stay creative. I never questioned it. She had her circle of friends, people she knew from college mostly. Women I'd see at our house once a month, drinking wine and laughing too loudly at stories I was never invited to be part of. I didn't mind. I figured everyone needs their space. We all have our people. I should have looked closer. Our 40th anniversary rolled around in September. I made reservations at her favorite Italian restaurant in downtown Syracuse, Francesca's. She loved the place for the dim lighting and the garlic bread. I had a small photo album printed, a kind of memory book. Photos from our early days, vacations, the kids' graduation ceremonies, the time we redid the kitchen together. I was nervous. It wasn't a flashy gift, but it was from the heart. We sat at a corner table. She looked beautiful, still carrying herself like the younger woman I met years ago. She flipped through the album slowly, said nothing. Then she looked up and said, as casually as if she were ordering another glass of wine, I've been laughing at your failures with my friends for decades, Leonard. My first thought was that she was joking. A terrible joke, maybe. One of her dry comments that didn't quite land. I laughed. What? She folded the photo album closed and placed it on the table. You really didn't know? Did you? She said, not meeting my eyes. I was too stunned to speak. She stood up, adjusted her scarf, and left. Just like that. I sat at the table for 10 more minutes, unsure if I was supposed to follow her or finish my meal. The waiter came by and awkwardly asked if I wanted dessert. I declined. I drove home in silence, the photo album in my passenger seat. The next morning, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Carla, her best friend. The one I always thought was polite to me, friendly even. The message said, he looked crushed. Did you see his face? That was priceless. I almost feel bad for him. Almost. Wine glass, my stomach sank. It wasn't for me. It was clearly meant for Bernice. I didn't reply. I stared at the screen, letting the truth settle in like thick fog. They had planned this. She said it to hurt me, and her friend reveled in it. I sat there for an hour, phone still in hand, wondering what else I didn't know. That was when I knew I needed to find out. All of it. The house was quiet. Bernice hadn't come home. I opened her laptop. She had a password, of course. The hint said first love. She once told me, during a particularly wine-heavy night, that her first love wasn't me. I laughed at the time. Now, it felt like a cruel foreshadowing. I typed in Andre. Success. The screen lit up. Desktop cluttered with folders, some named innocuously. Gallery inventory. Christmas plans, old taxes. I opened her email. What I found there changed everything. Hundreds, no, thousands of emails. Years of correspondence with Carla, Andre, and others from her college group. Threads titled, Another Leonard Moment. LOL, he did it again. Weekend plans winking-faced. There were photos of me. Doing ordinary things. Mowing the lawn, cooking dinner, sleeping in my recliner. Caption with jokes I was never meant to see. He wore that ratty old hoodie again. I'm tempted to throw it away and pretend it got lost in the wash. You should have seen his face when the dishwasher leaked again. He really thought he could fix it himself. God, How do you not scream at him daily? The emails with Andre were worse. The flirtation, the late-night check-ins. Then, the confirmations. She had been seeing him during her art trips to New York. For years, there were travel itineraries, hotel bookings, photos of them together. One taken from behind. Andre had his hand on her back, in a way I never did anymore. I felt sick. I didn't cry. Not yet. I was too stunned, too gutted. But I made copies. Of everything. I forwarded the worst of it to a USB drive. I printed a dozen pages of emails and put them in an envelope. And then, I sent them to Carla's husband, to Andre's wife, to the other women in her circle who maybe didn't know the full picture. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I didn't want to carry this alone. When Bernice came home 2 days later, she walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened. She placed her purse on the counter, looked at me, and said, "So, are we going to talk?" I handed her the envelope. Her expression shifted as she flipped through the papers. "You sent these to them?" she asked, voice low. I nodded. She didn't speak again, just walked upstairs. I didn't follow. I slept on the couch that night, the same one she had photographed and joked about with her friends. The next day, I met with a lawyer. I filed for divorce. Bernice didn't try to stop me. At least, not at first. The silence in the house that followed the day I handed her those printouts was a different kind of quiet than anything I'd experienced in 4 decades of married life. It wasn't the companionable silence of two people reading books in separate rooms. It was a heavy, strained stillness, like the air itself had thickened with the weight of everything unspoken. She stayed upstairs mostly. I stayed downstairs. We moved around like ghosts, orbiting each other without ever making contact. For the first time in our long life together, we were two strangers under the same roof. The papers were filed. My attorney, Mr. Hallbrook, a calm, meticulous man a few years younger than me, walked me through everything with a gentleness I didn't expect. He didn't ask for details, but I think he knew from my face. From the way I hesitated before signing anything. From the way my hands shook when I handed over the documentation. "Take your time," he said. "There's no shame in taking time." But that was the thing. I didn't want more time. I wanted closure. I wanted to reclaim the years that had slipped through my fingers while I was busy being loyal to someone who saw me as little more than a sitcom husband in her personal comedy of errors. About a week after filing, I got a phone call. It was from Laura, Carla's husband's sister. I barely knew her, had maybe met her twice at cookouts or birthdays, but her voice trembled when she spoke. She told me everything. "Leonard, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." I thanked her politely. Hung up. I didn't have the energy to relive it with every person who had just now realized Bernice wasn't who they thought she was. Or maybe she was, and I was the only one who ever got the edited version. 2 nights later, Bernice finally said something. I was sitting at the dining table, finishing off the leftover chicken I'd made for myself. She came in, stood in the doorway, and said in a flat voice, "Why didn't you say something sooner?" I looked up, fork in hand, and blinked at her. About what? That I was hurt. That I felt like a fool. That I spent my whole life thinking I was loved. She flinched. Just slightly. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. I laughed. Not cruelly, but from a place of genuine disbelief. "You didn't mean to hurt me?" I said. "You laughed at me. You mocked me. You cheated on me. You curated an audience for my embarrassment like it was a long-running joke." She didn't respond. Just stared at the floor. "You made me a character," I said, quieter now. "You edited me into someone to ridicule, because it made you feel something you were missing." "I was unhappy," she muttered. "I was bored. You were always so predictable. So safe. I needed more." "Then you should have left," I said, not yelling, just tired. "You should have told me instead of dragging me through the years pretending we were fine while stabbing me in the back with a smile." She walked out again. It went on like that for days. Tense exchanges. Long silences. Her side of the bed untouched. We stopped pretending we were waiting for some grand moment of reckoning. It had already come. The storm had passed, and all that was left was the cleanup. The kids came into it a few weeks later. I hadn't told them everything yet. I wasn't sure how much they needed to know, at least not then. But Clara noticed something was off right away. She called one Sunday and asked, "Dad, is Mom okay? You sound different." I didn't lie, but I didn't give her the full story either. I said, "We're going through something, Clara. It's complicated, but we'll talk about it when you're home next." She was quiet for a moment. "Is it bad?" I hesitated. "Yes, but I'm handling it." Clara didn't press, though I knew the questions were bubbling under the surface. She respected my space. That's something I always appreciated about her. Miles, on the other hand, was more like his mother. Direct. Impatient. When I finally told him, he was silent for a while. Then he said, "I never liked Carla." That caught me off guard. "What?" "I don't know," he said. "Even as a kid, she always treated you like an accessory. I just didn't think Mom. I didn't think she'd be like that." "Neither did I, son. Neither did I. I didn't tell them about the affair yet. That part felt too sharp, too fresh to hand over to my children. I didn't want them hating their mother. At least, Not until they had all the facts and could make that call themselves. Bernice, to her credit, didn't fight the divorce. She barely spoke to me unless necessary. Her face was drawn tighter every day, her skin a little paler, like the years were suddenly catching up to her all at once. I didn't feel satisfaction watching that, just a kind of melancholy. The same way you feel when you throw away something you once loved, but know you can't repair anymore. Every now and then, I'd see her rereading the printouts I gave her. Sometimes she'd sit on the porch with them in her lap, eyes scanning the pages like she still couldn't believe I found out. Like maybe if she read them enough times, they'd say something different. I didn't talk to Carlo again. I blocked her number. Didn't open any of the emails that came through after that accidental text. But I heard through someone that her marriage was falling apart too. Her husband had packed a bag and left after reading what I'd sent him. Part of me felt guilty, not for what I did, but for how much it must have hurt him. He was just like me, on the sidelines, unaware that the people we trusted most had built entire shadow lives in the margins of our shared ones. I spent a lot of evenings in the garage after that, not doing anything in particular, just sitting with a cup of coffee, surrounded by tools and old boxes. It felt safe in there, familiar, like a place untouched by lies. Some nights I'd open one of the photo albums again, flip through our early years, try to remember if there were signs even back then. There were smiles, sure, but now, every photo seemed to hold a question I didn't know how to answer. There was one picture that gutted me every time I saw it. Us sitting on the back steps in the fall, her leaning on my shoulder, her hand on my knee. It was so ordinary, so intimate. I had looked at that picture for years thinking it captured what love looked like. Somehow, the house felt smaller. It's a strange thing, how space changes when trust evaporates. The same hallways, the same kitchen, the same living room. Yet everything had a different weight. The air hung heavy, and every room felt like it had something to say. Memories, photos, furniture, reminders of a shared life that, I was learning, was shared unevenly. Bernice and I kept mostly to ourselves. It was like being roommates who didn't speak. There was no yelling, no slammed doors, no dramatic confrontations. Just two people walking around each other like ghosts occupying the same haunted house. She started staying out later. I didn't ask where she went. I no longer had any interest in knowing. The part of me that used to care about what she was doing, where she was going, who she was talking to, that part had curled up and gone quiet. I focused on logistics. The divorce was moving along faster than I expected. Our finances weren't complicated. She had her personal account from the gallery, but I'd always handled the bigger picture. Retirement funds, insurance, property taxes. She never had much interest in the numbers, and I never thought to hide anything. I thought that meant we trusted each other. I didn't know it actually meant I was just the one doing all the work while she lived freely behind my back. We had to talk about splitting the house. I suggested she keep it. I didn't want to stay in a place where every corner whispered her name. She seemed surprised by that. "You're just walking away?" she asked during one of our short, necessary exchanges at the kitchen table. "I'm not walking away," I said. "I'm just choosing not to live in a graveyard." She didn't reply. A few days later, I took a call from a man I hadn't heard from in over 20 years. Alan, a former coworker who moved to the Finger Lakes after retiring. I must have sounded off during the conversation because he paused halfway through reminiscing and asked, "Leonard, are you all right?" I surprised myself by saying, "No, not really." That conversation turned into an impromptu invitation. Alan told me to come visit for a few days. "It's quiet out here. Bring a book, get away from whatever's weighing on you." So I did. I left a short note for Bernice. "Gone for a few days. Please forward anything from the lawyer if it arrives." When I got to Alan's place, just a modest lakeside home with a little dock and a wood-burning stove, he welcomed me like no time had passed. He didn't ask too many questions. We sat on his porch in Adirondack chairs, sipping coffee, listening to the wind rustle through the trees. I told him everything that second night. I didn't mean to. I thought I'd keep it brief, maybe vaguely mention the divorce. But once I started, the words came out like water from a broken dam. Every detail, every betrayal, every humiliating moment I had uncovered. I poured it out between gulps of coffee and silence. Alan didn't interrupt. He just let me speak. When I was done, he nodded slowly and said, "I'm sorry, man. That's a hell of a lot to carry." We didn't talk about it again for the rest of the visit. That was exactly what I needed. Someone to hear me, without turning it into a debate or offering silver lining nonsense. When I returned home, Bernice was sitting at the kitchen table, a mug of tea in her hand. She didn't look up when I walked in. "I see you're back," she said. I nodded and dropped my bag near the coat rack. "Yeah, I didn't think you'd come back." That made me pause. "Why not?" She shrugged. "You've been disappearing more and more." "I'm not disappearing," I said carefully. "I'm detaching." The word sat between us for a while. Then she said something I didn't expect. "I never thought you'd go through with it." "What?" I asked, not quite believing my ears. "The divorce," she said, finally looking at me. "You've always been the steady one. The one who doesn't quit." "I didn't quit," I said. I just stopped pretending. That shut her up. She left for Carla's that weekend. I didn't ask if she was going to see Andre. By then, it didn't matter. My nights got quieter after that. Lonelier, too. I won't pretend otherwise. There were times I sat in the living room, lights dimmed, and stared at the empty spot on the couch where she used to sit. Times I reached for my phone to tell her something funny or pass along a photo from the kids, and then remembered. We had built a life together, yes. But I now saw how much of that life I had constructed on my own while she played along for show. She took the photos. She smiled for the holidays. She kissed my cheek in public. But behind the curtain, she was someone else entirely. I don't know if she ever loved me in the way I loved her. That's the part that still stings the most. Not the cheating, not the ridicule, not the betrayal, but the possibility that I spent 40 years giving someone my all, while she gave me a filtered version of herself. Eventually, Clara came home to visit. She hugged me tightly the moment she walked in, the kind of hug that says she knew more than she'd let on over the phone. "Dad," she said gently, "just tell me what happened." All of it. I sat her down. I told her more than I'd planned, about the emails, the photos, the text message from Carla. Her face changed with every detail. She didn't cry, but her eyes were glassy by the end. "She's not the woman I thought she was," she said softly. "Neither was I, apparently," I replied. She stayed for a week, cooked with me, helped me box up old things, even offered to stay longer. I told her to go home. "You've got your own life to live," I said. "I'll be fine." Clara left behind a note on the fridge before she went back to Boston. It just said, "You're not alone. We're with you." See, I read it every day. Bernice returned again, but only to collect more of her things. She didn't speak much, just moved through the house in silence, her eyes scanning each room like she was seeing it for the first time. Or maybe the last. She looked tired, not physically, but spiritually. Like all the armor she'd worn, the pride, the sarcasm, the mocking humor, had finally worn through, and there was nothing underneath but exhaustion. The days kept passing, but they didn't feel like healing days. They felt suspended, like I was living between two versions of my life, the one I thought I had, and the one I actually did. I'd get up in the morning and make coffee out of habit, still brewed enough for two. I never adjusted the setting on the machine. Some mornings I'd pour the extra cup and just leave it there on the table, untouched. Not out of some ritual, but because it felt stranger to make only one. The legal process was steady. The paperwork came and went. We signed things in separate rooms. There were no real fights over assets. She didn't ask for alimony. I didn't ask for explanations. We just wanted it done. At least I did. One morning, a letter arrived. Handwritten. Not an email, not a text, not a voicemail. An actual envelope with my name on it, in Bernice's neat cursive. I opened it slowly. It wasn't long, just a few paragraphs. But I read it twice. She didn't apologize. Not directly. She said things like, "I never expected to be this person, and I didn't set out to hurt you, and I don't know why I let it go on for so long." She mentioned Andre only once. Said he was a mistake she kept making because he reminded her of who she used to be. She didn't call it love. She didn't defend the choices. But she didn't fully own them, either. At the bottom, she wrote, "You deserved more than I gave you." I know that now. I just didn't know how to be that person anymore. I folded the letter and put it in the drawer next to the phone charger, where all the forgotten things go. I didn't write back. Around that time, I started going for long walks. Not for exercise, but for movement. There's something about putting one foot in front of the other with no destination. It quiets the noise in your head. I'd walk the same routes I used to take with Bernice years ago. Past the bookstore where we bought anniversary cards, the ice cream stand where we took the kids after soccer games. One afternoon, I passed by a woman walking her dog, an old Labrador, clearly slowing down but still loyal. We exchanged a polite nod. A few steps later, I heard her say, "Excuse me, sir. Sorry to bother you, but is that a Syracuse University sweater?" I looked down. I'd forgotten I was wearing the old orange crewneck from college. "Yeah," I said. "Class of '79. She smiled. I was 84. We chatted for a few minutes. Her name was Joy. Divorced. 2 grown sons. She had the kind of laugh that made you feel like you hadn't been a stranger just moments before. That wasn't a turning point. Not yet. But it was the first real conversation I'd had with someone outside my family since everything happened. When I walked away, I felt a little less hollow. Later that evening, I made dinner. Roast chicken and green beans. Something simple. For the first time in weeks, I set the table for one. No extra plate. No unused cup of tea. I sat down, ate slowly, and tried not to think about the life that had just fallen apart. But grief doesn't follow a schedule. It shows up when it wants. It creeps in during quiet moments, loading the dishwasher, folding laundry, passing her old scarf on the coat rack. And even though I'd made peace with the decision to leave that version of life behind, it didn't mean I didn't still mourn it. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't even the infidelity. It was the realization that I had been invisible in my own marriage. That all those times I thought I was being a good husband, bringing her coffee, rubbing her back when her arthritis flared up, leaving flowers on the porch after a tough day. I had been background noise to a story she was telling about someone else. A character. A joke. And yet, part of me still missed her. Not the version of her that had betrayed me. Not the woman from the emails, or the one who laughed behind my back. But the one I thought I knew. The woman I held through childbirth. The woman who cried with me when Miles had his first seizure as a kid. The woman who stayed up with me watching bad TV and eating frozen pizza because we couldn't afford anything else during those early years. I missed her. The version of her that maybe only existed in my mind. I don't know which was real anymore. I've heard people say that love is a choice. That every day, you wake up and choose to love someone again. But what if the other person stopped choosing you years ago and just never told you? What if they kept pretending for your sake, or out of guilt, or because the house was nice and the life was easy? These were the questions I started carrying with me on my walks. And with every mile, I let go of one piece. The laughter she shared with her friends. The sarcastic emails. The hotel receipts. The ghost of a marriage that died long before I ever realized it. The days settled into a rhythm. Not quite peace, but the early stages of it. The divorce finalized quietly, the way slow earthquakes do, damage already done, but the paperwork made it official. No courtroom drama, just a clerk's office, some signatures, and a final copy slid across a counter. Bernice moved into a condo on the east side of town. She asked if I wanted to keep any of the antique furniture. I told her to take what she liked. None of it felt like mine anymore. But even as she packed and left, I wasn't done. She thought I'd moved on, that I was just licking my wounds and learning to live alone. But I still had the receipts. Not just the emails and texts. I had every document, every itinerary, every joke at my expense that she'd emailed to her circle of friends over the years. I had the records of her fake girls' trips, the hotel bookings under aliases, the email threads that made me a running gag in her private world. And I had one thing more: time. While Bernice was busy trying to rewrite her life without me, I began carefully, methodically, letting the truth trickle out. Not to everyone, just to the right people. I sent an anonymous packet to the gallery board where she worked part-time. They prided themselves on integrity and professionalism. I made sure it included screenshots of her bragging about calling in sick for trips with Andre, mocking donors, and laughing about how she just needed to show up with lipstick and a scarf to keep the board happy. 2 weeks later, she was quietly asked to step down. Then, the alumni committee at Syracuse. Bernice had always fancied herself an ambassador of the arts, and they'd just honored her with a small alumni profile the year before. I submitted a tip to the newsletter editor under a pseudonym, along with attachments showing her making jokes about her boring husband funding her trips to see her real love in NYC. I didn't need to include everything, just enough to cause discomfort. The profile disappeared from the website by the following week. Still, I wasn't trying to destroy her. I wasn't out for blood. I just wanted the illusion gone. The one she had created of being some cultured, admired, graceful wife who'd simply grown apart from her marriage. Let the world see the truth. She wasn't a tragic woman stuck in a dull marriage. She was a liar who clowned her husband for sport. She curated an image while trashing the person who helped her build it. But the most satisfying move came unexpectedly. Andre's wife, Helena, reached out to me. Her email was brief but sharp. "Leonard, I just wanted to thank you for sending me what you did. I had no idea. 24 years of marriage, and he was seeing your wife under my nose. I'm done with him. I hope you are too. Maybe someday we'll be able to laugh about all this. Not yet, but maybe." That email gave me an idea. A quiet dinner. Just two people who had been through similar storms. I invited Helena to a small bistro in Skaneateles. Just conversation, no expectations. She was elegant, reserved, but warm underneath it. She wasn't out to bash Bernice or Andre. She just wanted to talk to someone who understood. We started having coffee once a week. We didn't rush anything, but we started living again, together. Word must have traveled. Bernice texted me one day out of the blue. "You're seeing her now? Seriously? You really are petty, Leonard." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I replied, just once. "No, I'm healing. You wouldn't recognize it." She didn't reply after that. Months passed. The house was sold. I moved to a small place near the lake. Nothing fancy, just clean, quiet, and mine. I started volunteering at the local library, fixing up old furniture, even joined a community group that did weekend trail cleanups. At some point, I realized I was smiling more, sleeping better, laughing without a bitter taste in my mouth. I wasn't angry anymore. And then came the final moment of quiet revenge. Clara and Miles both invited me to a joint anniversary party for their families. 10 years and 8 years, respectively. I hadn't expected to be asked to give a toast, but they surprised me halfway through the evening. I stood up. Everyone quieted. I looked at my children, their spouses, my grandkids running around the tables, and I raised my glass. "To love," I said. "Real love. The kind that shows up when it's inconvenient. The kind that doesn't need an audience. The kind that doesn't mock behind closed doors. The room was still. I wasn't naming anyone, but everyone who needed to understand did. I saw Carla in the crowd. She'd been invited, distantly connected through one of the in-laws. Her expression was tight, lips pursed. She avoided my gaze for the rest of the night. Bernice wasn't there. She hadn't been invited. Helena was, though. She sat at my table, and when the music started and everyone was dancing, she stood up and said, "Do you want to?" I smiled. "I do." And for the first time in decades, I danced without thinking of who was watching or what was being said behind my back. Not vengeance. Not cruelty. Just truth. And peace.